We start, as we frequently do at 10 a.m., with the morning brief. We have sort of danced around this theme as of late, you guys, as we have talked about various traditional car companies and their investment in the electric space. And we've also talked to, of course, a lot of new car tech companies that have gotten a lot of eyeballs and a lot of attention. What's interesting, though, is where stock investors have gone. And that's kind of what you wrote about, Myles, in terms of what we've seen year to date from the various auto investments.
Yeah, I mean, I really stole this one. I think it was from something that Sazi said on the show yesterday. When you look at the shares of Ford and GM, I mean, Ford shares are up over 40% this year. GM shares are up closer to 70% so far this year. And they are trouncing some of the next-gen EV stocks that have been the real buzzy trades in the market over the last several years. Tesla shares, they were down through yesterday's close, and of course, today's numbers changing these somewhat. Tesla shares were off about 10%, and then obviously what's happened with Lordstown has been its own kind of debacle. I know we'll talk about in just a second. And even Nikola, the stock is up about 10% so far this year, which again is still majorly trailing what we've seen from Ford and GM. But Nikola shares were cut in half last year, and I think figuring out what the company actually does is still an open question. NIO, Canoo, Fisker, Canoo and Fisker, of course, both went public via SPAC transactions. And you've got, a couple of your LiDAR plays in there. Ava is one that comes to mind. I don't even know how many different LiDAR companies we've talked to on this show. And my favorite framing for how all the EV stocks were trading in the beginning of this year is someone made the comment, and I wish I could remember who it was. It was somewhere, on financial Twitter, that all the EV stocks were trading like they were going to be the winner in a winner takes most market. And obviously that cannot hold, right? Tesla has been for the last decade the clear winner in the electric vehicle space. And that's why the stock is up 10,000% over the last decade. But there's only one Tesla. So this idea that you're going to have a bunch of companies doing the same thing, having those same kinds of dynamics as they all come public via SPAC transactions, and no one really knows who's managing the company, no one can keep their story straight, was just never going to hold. And Sazi, I feel like what the market is really pricing, because make no mistake, GM and Ford have been dogs for the last 10 years. GM went bankrupt during the last crisis, and the stocks were complete busts over the last decade. But I feel like what the market is saying today is that there is a chance these companies can remain kind of as relevant as they are for U.S. car buyers in the future of electric vehicles. That's kind of my read on it. How are you thinking about this?
Well, my read on this is actually quite simple. I think my new Executive of the Year award of this year goes to Ford CEO Jim Farley. I mean, it's been fascinating to watch Jim Farley do his thing. I mean, as you mentioned, Myles, the stock's up about 74% year to date. And he was at the Deutsche Bank conference yesterday, and I was reading the transcript last night. He said, quote, "Our pricing is just strengthening every day. Pretty breathtaking, actually. Not just the credit company, but actually in the Ford Motor Company, things are still fluid." So, we talk so much about Chipotle burritos having pricing power. You have Jim Farley saying, you know what, we have pricing power for our pricey pickup trucks and our sedans and whatever else we're selling right now. And that's a good thing for our company financially and our stock. And he went on to say, really, as an industry, we discount too much. Perhaps he wants to take a page out of Apple's playbook. Just stop discounting and charge full price for your car. So Farley he has won the narrative on Wall Street. And now the numbers, as you would suggest, this week, company raised its second quarter outlook. Now he has the numbers to back it up.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to wait to see how the year plays out, though. I mean, we are hearing from the automakers and other industries as well that some of the supply chain bottlenecks are starting to improve, particularly when it comes to chips. So during the second half of the year, maybe if that situation improves, maybe the conversation will turn back to demand to some extent, because if there is more supply out there, are we going to see consumers maybe being a little more choosy about which cars they're buying? And is that going to make a difference for Ford and GM and Tesla for that matter? So I'm really curious to see what ends up happening with those car buying trends when things return to quote unquote normal, but also as Ford and GM do have those more electric offerings.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit more about the electric offerings, and we teased it a little bit, but Nikola started this last year. Comments by company's founder Trevor Milton on what they were and weren't doing were widely criticized. Company then said not all of it was true, and now Milton's not associated with the company. Well, the saga at Lordstown has taken a similar shape. Former CEO Steve Burns coming on various media platforms, including ours, talking about 100,000 orders for trucks. Then they roll that back. Then Steve Burns goes on CNBC wearing a hard hat, trying to talk about the manufacturing capability. Brian Sozzi, earlier this week, the company replaces Burns and its CFO, and now the interim leadership has screwed up communication yet again on what orders have and have not been made with Lordstown. Company disclosing another update yesterday. What is going on here?
Yeah, well, essentially you had an executive the day before they came out with this SEC filing yesterday, I believe before noon or right around noon, walking back what that executive had to say in terms of pre-orders, essentially telling investors you can't believe what he said. So very strange, bizarre week for Lordstown Motors, not a week that I've seen in some time from a publicly traded company. You see the stock up about 3% this morning, but the read overall is that Lordstown probably needs an entirely new management team. They probably need an entirely new board of directors too, to fully clean house and try to chart a path to surviving into 2022. Very important that this company starts to raise cash very, very soon, or they're just not going to be in business. That said, I do appreciate Lordstown president who made those comments, Rich Schmidt, following me on LinkedIn. I hope he comes on the program and talks about the company.
I don't even know what to say about that. I was just going to say it's interesting to me in these situations where we're talking about new tech that people are excited about, that could potentially be more environmentally friendly, et cetera. It's sort of disappointing then when you don't have the execution to get the stuff to market and to get the stuff done, but for what that's worth.